Welcome back. In this video, we are going to now use the details that we get from our date picker dialog and then display them. For now, just in the toast here. So we get the year, we get the month, and we get the day of the month. So let's go ahead and just use the year, for example. So we can just say year was, and then the year here. And let's just say year. So let's test that once again and see if the selected year was 2021, and you see year was 2021. So now we can do the same thing and say month was, and then the month. So let's test that and select a date. So the month was the September, and now let's see. And month was 8. Oh, September isn't 8. September is 9, right? So what's up here? Well, the problem is that months are calculated again in the programming way, starting from 0. So January is month 0, February is month 1, and so forth. So what we need to do is we need to add the 1 to the month here, for example. So +1. Let's see and test it again. So select the date, and we can see month was 9. And then we can also use the day of month, and that would be day of month. And let's test that again, and we will see that it shows the 15th. So for some reason, the month is out of this world and starts at 0. The day, however, doesn't. So I don't know why that is, but that's how it is internally. Now we could make those names a little clearer, so we could say selected year, then selected month, and so forth. This would make it a little more readable in terms of the code. Okay, so let's use those here instead. Selected the year and day of month. Let me put that in another line here, like so. Okay, so now it will be a little more clear when it comes to the naming of those variables here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and set this text here, this one where it says 31st of May 1988, and display that instead. Therefore, we need to give this text view a name, an ID better said. So I'm going to give it an ID. You can go ahead and do it directly here. So click onto it and click here. I'm going to call it TV, standing for text view, and I'm going to call this one selected date. Okay, so this will be the ID. I press the enter key for this to be taken over, and you will see that this text view here, this one that is selected, which will also be highlighted. If you highlight it here, it will be highlighted in the designer as well. And you can see that this is in fact the text view that has this ID of TV selected date. Now we can use that. We can just use it in here in our click date picker. Unfortunately, however, we will need to create a new variable for it. So let's go ahead and create a new variable, val TV, and how did I call it? TV date or selected date, which is going to be of type text view nullable. Okay, and I will assign null to it for now. So we need to import it. You can see this widget here has been added. So widget text view has been added. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating this text view variable as a nullable so that I can set it to null, because I will not initialize it at this point. So I will not assign a value to it at this point. I will leave it empty until the point where I'm going to actually assign it. And that is usually in the onCreate method. So it's a good practice to set it up in the onCreate method. So here TV selected date will be found by its ID, r.id. And what was the name? Well, I called it TV selected date. And this is, of course, going to be a var here and not a val, so that I can actually change it after it has been created. I'm creating this var, and I also should make it private so that it's only going to be usable inside of this main activity and never accessible from another class, because you don't want the situation to happen where you are accessing the UI element of an activity that is currently not in view, which means that an activity that you currently cannot see, because if you try to do that, your application will crash. Okay, so what we're avoiding here is exactly that by using this private keyword for now. So we have this var TV selected date, and now we can actually use it in our date picker dialog. So now we can store the selected year, month, and day of month in the right format, or in whatever format we want to have. So I'm going to create a new variable called selected date, and I will just use string interpolation here, selected, and in my case, I'm going to use day of month slash then the selected month, and here we need to use brackets, right? Selected month plus 1, because there we had this weird situation, and then another slash and selected year. Now we can set the text of our TV selected date. So in order to set the text, you can just use the set text method. Okay, so set the text with our selected date. Okay, and here, because this is a nullable, we need to add the question mark. So set the text, that's one way of assigning a text. Another way is to just use the property. So you can hover over here and see what the IDE has to offer for you. And here it says use the property syntax. So that would be the alternative way here, where you say TV selected date dot text, and then you assign the selected text. So instead of using the set text method, which would be the old-fashioned way, you can directly use the property of the selected date. Okay, so let's test this. Let's see if it's actually going to display the selected date. So let's select the 15th. You see 15/9/2021. So that seems to work, and it even is in that format that I just said. So day of the month, selected year. Okay, so now we have the date in a certain format, but we need to have it in a date format, in the sense of a date object, so that we can then use it for calculating how much time has passed ever since. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a new variable called SDF. And this variable is going to be using the simple date format here. And what it allows us to do is, and here I'm going to use the simple date format like so. And what it allows us to do is to define a pattern that we want to use for our date. So for example, if I want to use date, day, then month, month, and then year, year, year. So let's say the 31st of 05, then 1988, for example. Then this would be the right format. And you can also define the locale that you want to use. For example, the English format of using calendar dates, or the French format, and so forth. So locale English will be the way to go here. So now we need to import a simple date format, and I'm going to use the Java format here. So this java.text. Okay, so this is the pattern, and then you need to pass the locale. So we're creating an object of the simple date format. And what this allows us to do is now to create an actual date object out of this SDF. So we're parsing from our selected date, which is just a string, we're converting that date here into the format that we want to use in the date object. And then this date object will later be used for us to calculate how much time has passed. By the way, just in order to make things a little clearer. So if you don't understand what a class does, or if it goes over your head, if I ever use something like, for example, this simple date format, right? Now I'm using this new simple date format class, or before that I used the date picker dialog class. If you don't understand them, I always recommend to check out the documentation, because here you'll find the simple date format, and in particular the one that we are using, which is under java.text. Okay, so that's where you can find the date format class, and you can find more details about it here. For example, also what all of these letters mean. So you have the M, for example, the capital M stands for month in a year. So here it would be July Joule 07. So these would be the different formats, context sensitive. Or if you use a lower m, that would be the minute in an hour. So that's really important. That's why we were using the double M here as capital letters, because lower caps M would be minutes. So D, let's look at what D means. And D stands for day in month. Okay, so day and month, which is a number, for example, the 10th or the 15th or whatever. And then finally we have YYY, which stands for year, year, year. And here you can go over and see what this lower Y means. So here, this Y just means year, as you can see here. So YY would display a 96 and YYY would display 1996. The same goes, by the way, also for month. If you were to use MMM, it would display July. If you use MM, it will just use 07. Okay, but that's generally something that I'm trying to do, is not to do too many things at once and not exaggerate how deep I go into something. So I'm trying to not bore you with going too deep into every single detail, and at the same time give you enough information so that you get a good understanding of what's going on. But if you feel like there is something missing, so there is some class that you don't understand or some piece of code that you would like to know deeper or more about, then I really recommend to check out that documentation or Stack Overflow, because I don't want to bore the ones that just want to go through with it and don't care about the specific details, but just want to know how to actually apply it rather than knowing everything in depth. Okay, so that's just something that I wanted to give you as a side note. So let's finalize the application in the next video.